Well, thanks for having me here. I used to be, I was an ISTC member for a very long time. Tech authoring was my first career in the industry. I'm Roger. I'm currently working for Microsoft, and yeah, my background is in tech comms. I've moved around a little bit over the last decade or so. Yeah, I was delighted to be asked. Yeah, I've spoken at a couple of ISTC conferences, which was just a fantastic career asset for me. Just a great environment, really friendly crowd, and yeah, I encourage people to get involved. It's a good time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my product management experience and kind of about what product management is. And if we get through all of this, hopefully we will. There's a thread to that sort of could suspiciously sound like, well, if I did this, you can, which is the exact kind of sort of delusional meritocracy you might expect from a middle-class white man in the tech sector. So I want to be like super crisp that I got extremely lucky in my career trajectory. I'm by no means suggesting that any of this is intrinsic, but also not suggesting that like you should get out of tech comms. I had great fun doing it. I do think there are some really fun natural alignments between what tech comms professionals and product managers care about. And I'm going to try and unpack some of that because I think maybe they can help us understand each other. But also, if people do fancy kind of changing it up a bit, there's a whole bunch of super transferable skills. And a lot of it really is sort of about kind of how you talk about it or how you get the additive extra experience to kind of go and do some of the other fun bits. This is, sorry, apologies as well. This is a brand new slide deck. I've not given this talk before. It might be a little rough around the edges, and I might end up babbling a little bit. But happy to take questions at the end, and hopefully this will end up making sense. I'm going to talk about, yeah, what product management is, what therefore we care about, which is what then sort of leads into us being a bit difficult, and maybe how that makes it easier to turn into. My core argument is that we're sort of a nightmare to work with because our job is inherently very poorly defined. It's kind of a gluing and enabling function with very, very rough edges, and that makes it tremendous fun. Also a little bit of a recipe for burnout, actually. So, you know, it's one you've got to watch. Now, the 2023 version of starting a witless blog post with the Oxford English Dictionary defines is to just ask ChatGPT to do your homework for you and then sort of complain when it gets it wrong. So I asked Bing what product management is, and yeah, it did okay, not great, but okay. Bunch of waffle, but it kind of got to the core of the idea, which is that product management is an intersectional function. There's as many definitions of it as there are product managers, and the stickiest is one that people have probably heard. Product manager is the CEO of the product. You hear that quite a bit. It's a terrible, terrible metaphor. It's just not true. You don't have that authority, that responsibility, and you certainly don't get paid as much. The next most sort of sticky definition is the one that sort of AI Clippy has come up with, which is this intersectional idea. It's a really handy Venn diagram. And the Venn diagram is sufficiently familiar to a lot of product managers that it's actually the logo of the Mind the Product conference. I think it gets to the heart of what's brilliant and terrible about the job. Look at this, look at this intersection. It's a recipe for getting in everyone's way. And it's sort of why that CEO analogy isn't correct. Like, the CEO doesn't do this stuff. They sort of provide leadership and understand delegation and understand strategic alignment. I've heard a number of other definitions of product manager. You're probably familiar with the idea of the voice of the customer. That's a good one. I think about it as investment advice, actually, personally. That's one that I cleave to, this idea that you're understanding the business and the technology and the market well enough to make investment recommendations to an organization. Ooh, got a little bit of feedback there. Don't know if maybe someone's not muted. The point is that we don't really own any of these things necessarily, which is where this janitor idea comes in. My old boss Colin, who sort of taught me product management, used to describe you as the janitor of the product. You clear up after everything. You do the bits that don't otherwise get done. It's not that you try and do everything. It's that everything's got to get done, and ultimately it kind of can end up falling to you. I don't know, is that strictly true? I've seen it happen, I've seen it not. But the point is the intersection. The point is pulling all of these things together, which can lead to that janitorial aspect, to sort of the externality. if you think about what we're balancing here at the intersection of like UX and business, if you don't have any dev in there, then obviously that's a product you can't build. If you've got something that's beautifully designed, both from a kind of experience and from an architecture point of view, but that has no market input, then nobody needs it. Like there's a bunch of sort of failure modes of these intersections that you're kind of trying to avoid. That's sort of the business-facing purpose of product management, is to live at this intersection and kind of communicate and unify and provide product vision, essentially, but also to help people deliver. You're an enabling role. I actually have a simpler kind of grand unified theory of product management that's also a smug Venn diagram, but with one fewer circle. I see product management as working out what of the things you could do, you should do. Like, take the ideas in your organization, and of all of the things that people are yelling, hey, why don't we do that? Working out which ones actually make sense, and then desperately trying to get the organization to do only one of them at a time in a priority order. We recommend, product managers recommend to business managers that if we do approximately X thing with approximately Y managed risks, we'll get approximately Z benefits, and we'll try and make that approximately a bit more certain by getting involved and doing lots of user research. We spend our time understanding and balancing can and should, and like job ads for product managers call this making decisions in uncertainty, which feels a lot nicer than constant cognitive dissonance, I suppose. And I'm being like a little bit flippant as I go, because there are all sorts of problems with this, and I want to talk about some of the kind of inherent problems, because they'll get to why we can be a bit of a nightmare to work with. One of them is, as I think is fairly obvious, is ownership. You're not in charge. Other people are doing this work. They're doing it better than you ever could, regardless of your background. You know, who else cares about all of these things? Who is executing on them? If you have all of these functions, you might get into fights with them. You might end up treading on toes, and you've got to be really careful there. You know, UX can be owned or partially owned by all sorts of people. Dev, as a product manager, you're probably not going to be writing code, but you might have opinions or get involved in architecture. If you're making a highly technical product, you might, as a product manager, have a technical background, and you've got to really bite your teeth sometimes, bite your tongue sometimes, to kind of try and make sure the right thing gets done without trying to do it for people. There's a real balancing act. There's a real tension there. And kind of the other sort of big thing is just sort of capacity. We've probably all heard the sort of the old truism, good, fast, cheap, pick two. And, you know, all these three things in your organization sit across them does feel like it's just not possible. And it sort of isn't, because you have to kind of get a little bit involved in and care about all of them, but you just on any given day, you can't conceivably do all of this stuff. So there's a huge balancing act. Like product management guru Marty Kagan wrote this book, Inspired, that sort of everyone's read, and it's seen as the product management Bible. And in it, he says that a good product manager will need to work at least 50 hours a week. Now, you can get away with that if you're a fated conference circuit guru who's bubbled up through the sort of laissez-faire labor rights of Silicon Valley libertarianism. But over on Earth, where people like to do wild things like see their families, this just means the job is a massive balancing act. It's also why every product management job interview will ask you how you prioritize things, not because there's a right answer, but because we're hoping you all know something we don't. So how do you prioritize things, and how do you balance things? That's kind of the next big problem. What does success even look like? There's a bunch of like possible things that you could judge a product by that I've written down the side of this slide, and I've been measured on all of them over my career. Like, are you just delivering because that's the main thing the org cares about? Is it progress against plan within a wider delivery? Are you trying to raise a metric? Just more money, reducing customer churn, improving usage of a particular feature? There's all sorts of things that success could mean. And it could be from development project to development project. You know, it could vary across a product. Your product could be huge and you could have subcomponents. I'm working on something at the moment where we're looking at effectively, if we do this, then this happens and this happens and this happens, and maybe Microsoft makes some more indirect Azure revenue. Well, I don't have a direct line accountability on that, so we're sort of struggling to pick immediate metrics. We know what the overall strategy is, but struggling to pick immediate success goals. At a top level, we all care about making the product succeed, but it can mean so many different things. And that means that when product managers get involved in stuff like our weird drive-by helping, it could also be anything. And it could also have all of these ownership conflicts. So baked into the soul of the gig is a bunch of conflicting stuff that just makes us pretty hard to work with. And what I kind of want to talk a little bit about is how we solve those problems. Like, how do we work out what we're doing and where we're kind of spending our product management calories? Because hopefully talking a bit about how we work it out will demystify a little bit and make it easier to kind of work with us and understand where our sort of slightly mercurial seeming focus can sometimes be. So I'm going to unpack a little bit about some of our decision-making processes and sort of how product managers think about what to do with product. We don't have masses of time, so I'm going to kind of breeze through a couple of things and then try and get to the some of the stuff around kind of career trajectories and what's next. But hopefully, actually, the really exciting sort of the meat of this will be in sort of questions at the end. So how do we work out what to do? Well, we are suckers for a framework, and if you can put it on a 2x2 matrix, then we'll lap it up. I want to quickly, these are not all, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just the first, I don't know, 8 or 10 things that came off the top of my head when I was thinking about how we make decisions. I want to pick on a couple to sort of talk about the ways we think, and to kind of spoiler my conclusion, it's about product in market rather than necessarily usage of feature, that kind of up-leveled view on how it all adds up to have an impact in the market. And I do this to sort of share some of the ways we think, and to share a realization that I had a few years ago, that this is sort of stuff we were all already doing in tech comms, just kind of zoomed out and sprinkled a bit with thinking about money or thinking about wider strategy. That so much of this stuff is just the sort of understanding what your users need to do, leveled up to understanding what job your product needs to do. Is it that simple? It's almost that simple, you know? So I'm going to pick on 3 methodologies that that kind of really speak to me and that I lean on quite heavily as a sort of product decision-making framework, and that you can use to maybe sell the value of things in organizations. And the rest of the list down the side of this slide could, if you feel like it, be a fun afternoon on Google. The first one, quickly then, is category and market maturity. This is a bunch of ideas based on some work done by a guy called Geoffrey Moore. He wrote a book called Crossing the Chasm, which a lot of people have read. I recommend his book Dealing with Darwin, because that's the sort of condensed greatest hits of all of his ideas. But this is the idea that sort of technology diffuses, it has an adoption life cycle set of behaviors in the market, and then market categories also have a similar kind of life cycle. Things go through growth and decline and sort of market maturity, and at different phases in your market maturity there are different kind of types of product innovation, different types of things that it just makes more sense to do, and different discontinuities in the way things can and can't grow. So the idea of the chasm is basically that, like, enterprise software buyers don't talk to hipsters. Like, you don't have a guarantee of continuous growth. You need to articulate something in terms of the needs of enterprise buyers before you can have disruptive technology take root in the mass market. Once it takes root in the mass market, there's a whole bunch of other innovation patterns you might end up needing to follow. Picking an example, Salesforce was kind of caught the headwind of disruptive web CRM. Remember when Salesforce was exciting and new and simple, and now it's just a giant does everything platform, almost like Excel? So it got there by picking the right types, actually the right types of innovation extensions. So it was riding a sort of hyper growth by doing product innovation, adding better core features of CRM, and then had a bunch of application innovation, finding different applications for the same technology, and then finding wider applications across the enterprise. For example, realizing that everyone was using CRM data to build line of business applications, and so extending the underlying fabric capability of Salesforce to let you build those line of business applications within it. That let it capture more and more of kind of the value in any given business it was in, so more and more share in that business. So thinking about where your kind of technology categories and where your market categories are, it was also a CRM. It was operating disruptively in a mature market, which meant it always needed to have progressive enhancements, and it always needed to have value engineering. So understanding your kind of market maturity is a hugely powerful tool for how to work out what to do with a product. And if your product is in this place, then, or where, depending on which place in the life cycle it is, that's going to tell you a lot about what your product managers are caring about. Right? Are they caring about strong relationships with customers? Are they caring about large numbers of customers, small numbers of customers? Are they caring about incremental features? Are they caring about market diversification? It's going to kind of give you a handle on where they're going to care. In terms of working out where your product is in a marketplace, or kind of working out what your users care about, there's a whole bunch of research techniques and research analysis techniques. Some people might have come across the Kano model. I think it's Kano, not Kano. Technique developed by a Japanese academic in, I think, the 80s. I'm not 100% sure. And this is a way of analyzing user research. So you go and talk to your customers about how well their needs are met by different aspects of a product, and you find that they tend to stratify. There are core capabilities where you add more feature, you get more satisfaction. There are needs, effectively, things where if the product doesn't do it, they're just not going to be happy. And there are things where a relatively slight amount of implementation gives you a relatively high amount of satisfaction. So, like, I don't know, Spotify has to have the songs and play them and let them find them. And the more core music player capability you add, like the more albums, the more simple core functionality you add, the more satisfied people will get. If it doesn't, play and have the songs you want, you're never going to be satisfied, however well built. Like, you're not getting extra satisfaction. It either does it or it doesn't. Table stakes. And then delighters like the wrapped yearly playlists or some of the auto playlist generation functions. Just a small amount of implementation gets you quite a lot of satisfaction. Depending on where you are in the market, what type of things that you're building might kind of sit in different places on this curve, and you might get different value from them. It helps you understand if something is in that needs category. It helps you not over implement. If something is, but also make sure that you do enough. If something is in that kind of want category, if something is in that core demand category, you kind of have that as the main balance of your investment. And you don't want to over-invest in the delighters, but you do need some, and you get so much of a payback from adding a few. So again, ways of thinking about how to break up your product innovation and how to add value. I probably need to hurry up a little bit. Another kind of there's so much reading to do here, but there's a framework called Jobs to be Done, which is sort of like writing user stories but going to therapy. It's a way of asking your customers what they really care about. And it has this idea that every product is doing a job. You hire a product to do a job, and that job is not just the feature. It's the thing it does for you in your life as a user, both practically and almost emotionally. And it's always competing with something. The example I sort of like to think about is Excel. No one comes to work in the morning wanting to use Excel, right? Like, I mean, okay, maybe someone does. There is actually a competitive, like online competitive Excel championship as an esport. It's fascinating to watch. But you don't, in general, come to work in the morning to use Excel. You come to, I don't know, say, file the quarterly figures. But that's also not the only job you've got to do. The other job you've got to do is you want to file the quarterly figures such that, like, fast enough or accurately enough that you look great in front of your boss. So what's the job Excel's doing? It's filing the quarterly figures and making you look good. How is it doing that? How does a feature contribute to use that to do that? How do you make the user more awesome, not the feature more awesome? That's kind of Kathy Sierra's whole thing. She's brilliant. And that's kind of a way of thinking about how you invest, thinking about what you need, thinking about why people buy your product. They don't buy it to have the feature, they buy it to do the job. And this operates at the company level as well. Companies invest in either earning money, saving money, or mitigating risk. And that's, if it's a B2B product, your product does one of those three, or some of those three things for a company. And the better it does that job, the more worth paying for it is. And of course, you're always competing with something. With Excel, you might be competing with Google Sheets, you might be competing with some other technology, you might be competing with a tissue of workarounds, or Excel is often competing with things. People build horrifying line of business lash-ups in Excel that could be solved with MS Power Apps or with Salesforce or with other things. So you're usually competing with a direct competitor or a workaround or dissatisfied non-consumption. And working out where you are is hugely powerful. Jobs to be done, I think, is super relevant then to the meta problem of working with product management. Like, you want to do some jobs to be done analysis on your product manager. Ask them why they're doing this thing and what they really get. No, I mean, you could do that, but trying to understand where they're at and what they're trying to get done is a huge thing. And that's the kind of my beat them argument, or maybe understand them, is if you can sort of load a little bit of product thinking into your head and understand that, like, we might be working at sort of the level of delivering feature A, But we're not just delivering feature A, we're trying to move the needle on some metric or deliver for something as part of a holistic product. We're trying to build product market fit by making sure that it's more usable to its customers. And so you could have a total world of expectation or conceptual mismatches, depending on sort of how you're working together. And you could be trying to own things in a totally different way, like maybe a product manager is coming in and interfering in something because they've misunderstood how valuable it is, or they don't perceive that it's being done in some way, or that they perceive it's being done, but that they, I don't know, there's all sorts of stuff here, but communication mismatches, like scratch a business problem and you'll find a communication problem, right? So understanding how it is that product managers are sort of seeing the world and how they see the kind of the value chain of the contributions to the organization and how they try and pull it together is sort of how you, I think, unstick some of the communication stuff. I have eaten almost all of the time, and I want to make sure we get to some questions. So I'm just going to quickly talk about ways of sort of coming to join us, which broadly speaking are kind of about leveraging your skills at the intersections, like working out which of these categories you have overlapping experience in and which you don't. Like as a tech comms professional, you've probably got a lot of UX and dev experience. You might have less exposure to some of the business stuff. I via content strategy looped out into marketing and then came back after I thought better of it, but there are probably better ways of doing that. Like finding your friends, for example. So maybe there are other departments that have a bunch of initiatives that are going on that you can use to kind of learn some of the other bits of the overlap or add some value to, like finding out what projects they've got going on. Things that I've sort of done in my career, getting involved in user testing with UX, in content marketing, like particularly sort of highly technical content. Content marketing can play a huge role in lead nurturing, which is a whole extra sort of talk, but building rich content funnels to sort of help educate people that aren't yet ready to buy your product. And then as they buy their product, they sort of get progressively more educated so that you retain customers. Technical content is hugely valuable there. And if you've got the capacity to get involved in lead nurturing, then you can be involved in a bunch of business side and marketing side stuff that's hugely important for the organization and for the bottom line. There's a couple of things in particular that I really like to do. I'm doing this at the moment, actually, which is docs-based prototyping. I'm working on API products, CLI products, where the user experience sort of almost is the documentation. That's sort of how we come to market. And so we can do relatively inexpensive, high-fidelity prototyping by writing docs, putting those docs in front of customers, getting customer feedback. And that's not just making the feature better, that's validating the entire business idea. That's kind of, is this product going to work? It's sort of existential. And maybe you can get involved in that, or maybe even just if you decide you want to apply for a product management job, you can kind of talk about that as a bunch of sort of experience you have. But it's a thing to kind of potentially consider getting involved in or parlaying content skills into. It's so valuable, and you can even do it for things that aren't necessarily CLI based. I mean, visual mockups, yes, are better for web apps, but you can genuinely do a whole bunch of concept testing with docs. It works so well. Content auditing, something else I've done. This is a picture of, I just printed out a bunch of stuff from the website of a company I was working at and kind of mapped out how it was interrelating as part of articulating the need for content strategy and the need for a kind of holistic content strategy between tech comms and marketing. It's a great opportunity if you can get involved to work with marketing, so long as you're careful not to sort of tread on toes or look like you're teaching them how to suck eggs. But and it sort of gets you into that kind of more strategic aspect of what is the website for? How does it work? How does it hang together? How does the content fit into a more sort of holistic place? Which sort of brings me to one of the main things I think about parlaying any set of transferable skills from a more dev type end of the business into a more business end of the business, which is, I actually said this at TCUK in 2014. This is the slide I showed talking about collaborating with marketing and how technical content had a massive like top funnel content marketing value. And since then, I mean, what's changed? My slides are mostly teal rather than gray, and I think the typeface is Helvetica rather than Arial, but not masses has changed since then. I don't believe this, by the way. Like this was my flippant summary then, but like learning to talk like a revenue center, learning to kind of express the value, like reducing support cost is tremendously important, but it's nowhere near as sort of exciting in, say, a product management interview, or exciting when you're speaking to the business as increasing sales, as increasing customer retention, as validating product concepts. So kind of product positioning is a key skill, and thinking about how you sort of do that for your own skills is a sort of piece of slightly, hopefully not too patronizing advice I would earnestly give. So yeah, that's sort of been my personal trajectory. There were only 3 job titles across all of those functions. I moved into some content strategy, from there into some product marketing. But it was all about working out how to take the things I already cared about, which were enabling users, making users able to use the product, and then sort of branching that out into, well, okay, how do they find the information? How do they understand the website? How does that fit together? How does it fit into our marketing ecosystem? Okay, from our marketing ecosystem, well, what's the difference between our users and our customers? What makes someone buy something? And that's, so then taking those ideas of customer understanding and purchase funnel and purchase process understanding into kind of product market fit. You go on this conceptual journey out from sort of usability and user needs into business needs, and then back into what the humans care about. In product management, you always end up back at what the humans care about. It's just kind of all the same stuff, but with different hats on and sort of explained different ways. I guess that's my thing here. There's a whole bunch of things that we do that you can kind of parlay into product speak. If you're lucky enough to have the opportunities, or kind of if you get to talk to people, if you can volunteer to get involved in initiatives. So that's, sorry, I've talked quite fast because we had a late start, and I'm honestly a bit nervous. I've not done much speaking for a while. So I've got a couple of references to some books that I would recommend, but I think, yeah, that's sort of largely me for the day, and hopefully I've left a few minutes for questions.